Before I dig right into the painting, I just want to introduce you to my field setup, because there are some things to consider when you're working outside. The physical arrangement here, the sand on a brightly sunlit day can be very luminous, and it can throw off your perception. So I always put a gray blanket or furniture pad down on the sand. I also do that when I work in the wintertime. I'll lay it right down on the snow so that I'm not getting a lot of light bouncing up in my eyes. The wind is blowing pretty hard today. My easel could easily go over, so I always hang my backpack off this center post on my tripod. Just another practical tip. Now, an important thing to consider is the direction the sun is traveling, tracking the sun. That's why I carry a compass in my painting gear, particularly if I'm in an area that I'm not familiar with. So I established earlier that east was that way and west was that way, so I know that the sun is traveling in that direction. So what I've done is I've selected this view back here because it's giving an angular light as the sun is hitting the waves, which is going to emphasize the form in the painting. And because I know it will stay consistent, it's going to arc directly that way. It's going to leave me a pretty good window of time that I can spend to develop the lighting effect within this study. So what I had done is I had noticed that there were three important triangles that were being established over here. And I watched this happen for quite some time. There's a breaker here, and there's three things that happen. There's this series of diagonals. There's also a color change in these. This one had a warm yellow-brown tone to it as the sea is churning and picking up the sand underneath. And over here is where some of this foam had already broken. It rolls and breaks. Down in the foreground here in this lower corner is just a bit of that wet sand. Now, these thumbnails don't have to be pretty. All they have to do is be evidence of what you've been thinking. And as I put a few marks down here, you'll begin to see the very, very first evidence of this image emerging. Now, you can't dawdle with a thumbnail, especially when you're outside. The conditions are changing, the conditions are mutable. You gotta move. You gotta have some pretty clear thinking about what you intend to do. This is your work surface now. You're not performing. You're committing yourself to your subject. And as you begin to see these ideas form, you'll say, well, that works or that doesn't. But this is the only way to find out. There's a belief, it goes right back, all the way back to Renaissance painting, that shadows should be transparent and the highlights should be more opaque. So I like to keep my first layer of paint very transparent. And I'm going to start with one of the lighter tones, this area right here, and it has a warmth to it. So I take a fair amount of liquid. Again, whatever kind of medium you're using, but with this underpainting technique, you have to be very sparse with the medium itself. If you use too much medium, the surface becomes slippery and it becomes very difficult to paint on, and I want to show you what I mean. This is more about scrubbing than it is about putting a lot of loose fluid onto the surface. You don't want a lot of loose fluid. In fact, I'm going to take some of the paint right out of my brush right now with this rag. And all I'm doing is introducing a general hue. Now, this might look strange to you as I'm laying it in, dingy and brown. That's simply because none of the other lights and darks are on there yet. At the final conclusion, my values, I hope I've manipulated them sufficiently that I can put down a couple of shimmering spots. I'm going to use my study as my guide. I'm just touching that into that cad yellow light. Cad lemon, the same thing, either one. These are the final punctuations, the little marks that I hope will activate the painting. I choose where these go through what I know to be the geometry of the way the light is hitting this. So back to this idea that this is kind of a barrel, if you will, or a cylinder. So that's the arc of the cylinder. And with that light coming down, I remember it from yesterday, it was coming in over the top of my right shoulder. That's probably the most direct spot where that light would hit. And so bang, that's where it's going to get it.